This is Warren Vanderhill with the Center for Middletown Studies project on deindustrialization and economic development in Muncie, Indiana. The date is June 12th, 2008, and today I'm interviewing State Representative Dennis Tyler. I want to thank you for agreeing to participate in the project, Dennis, and I'd like you to begin by perhaps giving me a little bit of background, how you happen to get interested in politics in general, and more specifically in economic development.
Sure. Thanks, Warren. I can go back to I hired onto the Muncie Fire Department in 1965. Matter of fact, when I retired in 2007, I retired with the longest tenure in the history of the Muncie Fire Department. 42 years and 5 months and 31 days, I believe. But how I got involved in politics, the first 7 or 8 years on the fire department, I was just happy to have a job, wasn't interested in the political spectrum or anything like that. Then some things started happening there on the department. I had been asked to train some people for a aerial driving job that on the new snorkel that Ball State had helped buy the city of Muncie, as a matter of fact, and that I would more than likely be in line for one of those then driving positions. So I did, and I didn't get the job. Other people got the job. Well, I got off work the one day after they'd made them appointments, and I went home to my mom and dad's house, and Dad was home from work. He worked at Warner Gear, and I sit there and I was complaining to him and whining and crying and how this had happened and everything. And he just looked at me just as serious could be, and he said, "Well, son," he said, "how much longer are you going to continue to sit there and do nothing, or when are you going to get involved and what it takes to improve yourself in that fire department through the politics or whatever?" He said, "Politics are an organized labor, politics are in every part of life, and politics are definitely involved in your job." And I went home and thought about that, and I said, "You're right." And the next day, I called the union president and said, "What can I do to be involved?" And from then, I've been involved and got involved in politics through that with my dad and my mother, and seeing how they came up and what their thoughts were, and those were pretty much Democratic thoughts and that, and I have always felt that was where my drive should come from, was the Democrat philosophy. Got involved through different elections in the union politics, being involved the first time elected vice president, then I was elected treasurer, then I was elected president, and just stayed involved in that in a lot of different ways, Warren, and then got involved in the East Central Indiana AFL-CIO Labor Council back in the 80s, and was eventually elected president of it back when we was going through some pretty tough times, starting to see the transition that we was losing in East Central Indiana. Matter of fact, put together a television show for public television on the impact of NAFTA on East Central Indiana, and that put together an hour show, and it ended up being shown in a lot of public television stations across the nation, because we used real working men and women that came in and talked about what had happened to their plants and what had happened to their jobs, and how we had people from RCA in Bloomington and the Levi plant over in Jay County, Chevrolet here, Warner Gear here, but all of that. And then I got involved in the Democrat Party, ran for precinct committeeman, was elected to that, started working my way up through the ranks there, and in 1998, a number of people had came to me and asked me to run for Democrat Party chairman. I agreed to do that, was elected in December of '99 to fill the vacancy of Phil Nichols as he was resigning for health reasons. Went in as Democrat Party chairman. Not too long after that, I made the conscientious decision to step down as president of the Labor Council. I felt like it wasn't a conflict for me, but there was people in the community in that that was making the issue, well, Dennis Tyler's too involved in the labor council. He can't take care of what we need to in the political side of things. And then there was people in the political side of things that was saying, or the labor side of things that was saying, you know, Dennis can't take care of what he needs to here on the labor side of it. So I just thought, well, you know, as Democrat Party chairman, you have an opportunity to work with everybody in the community. I can probably do more for labor and working men and women serving as Democrat Party chairman. So I stepped down from the Labor Council, went into the chairmanship of the Democrat Party full time. Served in that capacity up until December of 2005, and as you well know, Tiny Adams passed away. Excuse me, in 2005. So there was by party rules, state party rules, and party rules, there was a caucus where you have to fill a position and you have to fill it within a certain amount of time. And to be honest with you, I had worked and served on economic development committees and that back on the Labor Council and as party chairman, served in a lot of forums and that on what we thought we needed to do to improve the working standards and that here in Muncie. So Senator Craycraft had decided earlier in 2005 that he was not going to run again, that he had spent his 28 years in that, and he had asked me if I had an interest in doing that, and honestly, I didn't. I said, no, Allie, I'm really pretty happy doing what I'm doing, and I had ran for mayor in 2003 and really enjoyed that and thought that it was good for the community and that, and we got a lot of things out that we thought needed to be talked about and discussed, but I just didn't have an interest in doing that. And then when Tiny passed away, a few days after Tiny's passing and meeting with the state party chairman and others and knowing that we had to have a caucus by the end of the year by party rules to fill that position to prepare for that coming session in 2006 was the following week, first week in 2006. I had a number of labor people that came to me and met with me, and matter of fact, a group of them even came by the fire station and asked me if I would consider filling that seat in caucus. And I really hadn't even thought about it, excuse me, to be honest with you. And that was on a Saturday, and I said, well, let me go home and talk to my family on Sunday. So I went home and talked to my wife and kids and that, and I said, what do you all think? And my wife said, well, do you think you could better serve Muncie and Delaware County as a state representative, or do you need to run for mayor again and try to get reelected? And I said, well, I don't know, but I said, I can tell you this, I said, I've had so many people come to me from the private sector and organized labor. How do I continue to keep asking these people to support me in my endeavors, whether it's for other candidates or that as Democrat Party chairman, but now they're all coming to me and asking me to fill this void, and I'm telling them no, and then next year I turn around and ask them to come back in and start supporting me again. So I decided I would do it, and I did, and it's been a heck of a ride from walking in there, the first week in 2006, and meeting the Speaker of the House. Well, at that time he's a minority leader, Representative Bauer. And he told me get 5 bills ready to introduce next week, and
sounds like Pat.
Yeah. So I did that, and it's been quite a ride, and but I've always cared about economic development. I've always cared about the working men and women. I still think that they're the greatest asset Muncie's got and this state's got, Warren, and that if we keep a good workforce and a well-trained workforce, and that businesses will come. And my concern is that how we're bringing them in, and the types of jobs that we're creating in our area, are they really going to allow people to sustain a good quality of life for them and their children, and get a good education and take them on into higher education and that? Because if you look at the way things are growing or not growing, it's evident that we've got some serious issues, and we've got to figure out excuse me, how to continue to create jobs that are going to have a living wage built into them that people can have a good quality of life.
Let me be a little more specific. Go back to the time, because I want to divide this a little bit, before you became a state legislator, and could you tell me some of the specific economic development programs or initiatives you were involved with before you went down to Indianapolis?
Sure. It's really ironic, but back years ago when Jim Carey was mayor, we implemented with the mayor and the city council, the economic development income tax. Right. And at the same time, they also implemented tax abatements and the Urban Enterprise Association and some things to try and start moving Muncie in another direction. I was one of the people that they came to ask to speak in front of the city council and other organizations in support of them. And I said, man, you're putting me out there in a pretty tough position, when you're talking about 2 new taxes, a tax abatement program, an economic development income tax, and the UEA. But I did, and worked with them to get those moving and put them together in a spatial way. And the edit tax, I can remember very clearly the night that all that was adopted at the city council and finalized. Myself and the finance chairman on the city council emphasized the importance of having a plan for that money.
Yeah, right.
That if we didn't have a plan for that money, eventually that money would end up being pretty much a slush fund. Yeah. And I think if you would look over the last few years, that's pretty much what it's became. And the tax abatement program has been a pretty good program. We've moved it also not just from where it was at, but also allowing for new housing development in the city of Muncie, giving, I believe it was a 3-year tax abatement on new housing construction. And we thought that might help energize some housing development in the city of Muncie. And there's always been a big battle about tax abatements and people that believe in them and don't like them. And a tax abatement is a program that doesn't take taxes away from the community. It's taxes that wasn't there in the first place. And so you abate it till you get it to the point of then where they start paying taxes. And there's still a lot of argument on whether or not there's pros and cons in them. The same way with the tax increment financing districts, we've always promoted them because they have really generated a lot of economic development, not just here but throughout the state. The problem's been, as we found it in serving on the Ways and Means Committee, is that what they were originally intended to do and created for was to start bringing tax dollars back in to the communities for tax relief, and not very many of them are doing that. And that really created a problem in Ways and Means, and that's why there was some language change in House Bill 1001 on how they operate.
Would you say, as you look back into the 1980s, that to get these kinds of economic development programs implemented in Muncie, that there was a fair amount of cooperation between, let's say, Republican elements of the community and Democrat labor elements in the community?
Yeah, because there was, and I guess the reason that there was, if you look at what tax abatements, TIF districts, and edit plans and that, they start out, the first element of support of that ends up going to the business community. Then it trickles down into labor, you hope. And a lot of people think that trickle-down economics work. I'm not so sure that it works and is working today the way that it was originally intended to do. I think I'm one of the believers now that believes that a lot of this should start trickling up. That if the employee is making a good quality living wage and can feed his family and provide the health care they need, that you're going to see an employee that's really excited about getting up every day and getting to work and being a part of their community. And so most of the programs that you've seen that the state has created and locals have created, the business community has always been ready and willing to grasp them.
Right.
The labor community early on, and a lot of them I think was very supportive. I think then as you saw things starting to shift, as jobs were leaving our community, and keep in mind back in the middle '80s, and I'm sure you know from your studies, we probably had 12 to 15,000 manufacturing union jobs in this community, and they were pretty darn supportive of anything that would keep those jobs here and what they needed to do. And I think a lot of what you see that's moved forward in now and to where we're at now, Warren, is that there's a vision or a thought of distrust that we've given up our health care, we've given up wages, 25% of our wages, 35% of our health care. We've given up different working conditions and nothing's gotten better. We're still losing our jobs. And yet they're still wanting more and more, more abatements, more this, more that. And I think that's created a lot of the distrust in that between the working men and women and the management business side of it. And then you got to remember too, working men and women that work in the state of Indiana that aren't protected by a union contract or a collective bargaining agreement are employees at will. So they could be terminated at any time for just darn near anything. So
do you think that your involvement in local area economic development has changed since you went down to Indianapolis to be a state legislator?
Yeah, I do. The General Assembly is a learning process, and as you well know, you've got three branches of government down there. You got your Senate side, you got your House side, and then you got the administration side. To get anything passed into law, you have to be able to compromise. And I early on, as a Democrat Party chairman, there's not a lot of compromise in that. You got your Democrat values, and you represent your precinct committeeman and your vice committeeman and your office holders. So there's not a lot of room for compromise when you're dealing in that. Excuse me. But coming also up through being a firefighter for 42 years and negotiating contracts for them, I knew that there was a lot of compromise and ways to make concessions that still everybody wins at the end of the day. So that's, I knew when I walked through the doors down there, that General Assembly, that was one of the things that if I was going to be successful in creating property tax relief for senior citizens and health care and a lot of other issues that I've been able to get past this last three sessions, I was going to have to be able to walk to the other side, meet with Republicans, convince them that this was a good idea, not just for my constituents, but for their constituents. And when we could, it would be very easy then to sell it to the governor. And and it is, and Republicans have to do the same thing. And it's interesting when you're in the majority, how people come to you.
Yeah, like you are.
Right. Now this last 2 years. And in the first year that I was down there, every good idea that I had to sell it to a Republican legislator to get him to carry it so it could get hearings. And it worked out pretty well. I mean, it worked out pretty well. I was able to work with some Republican legislators that allowed me to amend into a bill that they had to allow the Delaware County Airport Authority to create an economic development district out there that I thought would be a good fit with the TIF and everything we had across the street there.
What is TIF?
Tax increment financing.
Oh, okay, TIF. TIF.
Yeah, and it's where you can take tax dollars from the entities and the businesses that are within that district, and you can roll them right back into that district to promote and create more economic development there.
So as you look at the last year or two, big picture, how have you been able to assist local economic development initiatives from your position as a state legislator?
The easiest way for a legislator to do that is that to let local elected officials know that you're ready, willing, and able at any time to go anywhere, any place with them to sell the community.
Okay.
If you look at legislation that the General Assembly has put in place, not just since I've been down there, but even before that, allowing economic development tax districts to be built, home rule, tax abatements, tax increment financing, economic development districts. There's more and more pieces of legislation that we bring forward as legislators that we send back to the locals.
Okay.
It's up to the locals then, to be able to sell their community, what they have to offer, to start bringing the businesses in. And as you well know, today more than ever, it is so secretive when businesses start looking at a community.
Oh, yeah.
They want nobody to know absolutely anything. They've really got the communities at their mercy.
Right.
Because they've got them bidding against each other. Hey, if
That's right.
you want to come to Anderson, if Muncie will only give you $1 million, we'll give you $1.5 million. And they've really, really put us at their mercy, and I don't like that. I think it's absolutely wrong. I mean, we've even gotten to the point in the state of Indiana where now we are allowing businesses to come in here, and we're giving them state tax dollars to locate here, and then we're allowing them then to discriminate and decide which counties and cities and towns that they allow to apply for employment at their facilities. I just think we went way, way too far on that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, back on what you're saying.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that a legislator can do as far as him attracting the businesses into a community, unless there's something that he can pick up on down there in the halls or something, and hear somebody say, hey, so-and-so is looking at a spot here in Indiana or something. Okay. Well, then you try to capture that, and then maybe try to see exactly what it is, and then see if there's anybody at the local level that's interested in it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is the locals coming to you, such as when the IBM call center was looking at being implemented. Right. The phone calls that I had from Roy Budd and a couple others, would you make some phone calls to see where we're at on that and how far we can go on that. The Economic Development District there for the airport. When I got that idea sitting in committee where I saw the bill coming through for the Vandenberg County Airport down in Evansville, I thought, man, this is just a perfect opportunity for Muncie and our airport. So I called Terry Murphy and ran the bill by him, and I said, Terry, I can get Muncie amended into this bill. And he said, well, you really think you can? I said, yeah, I think I can. And it was in 2006 where I was in the minority and the first freshman legislator. And he said, well, if you think you can, Dennis, give it a shot. Well, I did, So, I mean, those are the types of things that legislators can do to help the locals. And then, but it's got to be a two-way street. I mean, locals have got to reach out to the legislators too at times and bring them in. And that was one of the things. I took that to Dan Allen with a couple city council people in 2006 and recommended that we start having meetings, maybe on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis, to where we can have a little bit of an update on what's going on, to where if there's something that's coming available in Indianapolis through legislation or something like that I can give them a little heads up on to get ready for. That might be a tool to help entice a business to locate here.
So it's really kind of a two-way street, that if you see something that's going on down there, then you would contact a Dan Allen or a Terry Murphy, or if they see something here, whether it's East Central Indiana with Roy Budd or Muncie with Dan and Terry, they would contact you. That's
sure.
Okay.
Sure, and I think that's the way it's got to be. Okay. I mean, another good example is before the session was over and before the House Bill 1001 that had all the property tax relief in it. Well, Indiana associations of cities and towns, and they were bringing elected officials down to Indianapolis, as well as a lot of other people to testify on that. Well, I had offered, the mayor an opportunity to come in and to testify in front of Ways and Means, because I serve on that committee to talk about the fiscal impact that it was going to have.
Pretty important assignment, I might add.
Yeah, absolutely. But and then that evening, I met with the mayor at the IACT had a reception there for their officials and I went over there and just kind of threw out my hand to the
Right.
mayor to let her know that anything, whatever, after the session's over,
Right.
that I can assist in, that this is going to be a tough bill for the city of Muncie to deal with, that
Right.
our impact is going to be much larger than most second-class cities. So whatever you need out of me, Sharon, I'm more than willing,
Right.
to do to help you work through
Right.
this. And I think that's the way that it has to
So
work.
on economic development issues, as we speak on June 12th, 2008,
Mhm.
how much contact have you had with the current mayor?
Not much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Want to say that a little louder?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah, okay, okay.
I've
So you've opened the door, but there
Yes.
haven't been too many
Yes.
calls.
yes,
Okay.
I give the chamber a legislative wrap up.
Okay.
They asked me to come in and meet with them and Jim Regal and
Right, sure,
others,
yeah.
and talked about what went on the last few weeks in the session, and that there's got to be communications between the city and their legislators and others. To me, it's just like a triangle, Warren. You've got your administrative branch, which is the mayor,
Mm-hmm.
your legislative branch, which is us, and then I think your local elected officials and business people.
Right.
And I think they've all got to work on this.
Right.
And I'm still ready and willing to do that.
Okay.
I had some contact me last week if I would still be agreeable to doing it, and I said absolutely.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm not going to get in the middle of this deal with this property tax group.
Okay. So right now, again, playing up on this,
Mhm.
today we're doing an interview on June 12th, 2008. Are there some specific economic development initiatives that you're working on right now?
Yes, I've got one that if we can keep it moving,
Okay.
that would directly impact the village and all the way down around the tech park and back and through, that would have a tremendous amount of economic development and tax dollars that we
Okay.
can bring in. We've got to get the city involved in it through their planning commission and their
Right.
economic development commission to approve it. And if they do then I think that the opportunities to reconstruct the village, bring a hotel in there on top of the village, and some other things, Warren, would have a tremendous.
Yeah, I know what you're
amount.
talking about.
Yeah.
I'll call this the Tom Kinghorn plan.
No, mine isn't the Tom Kinghorn plan. His is a $500 million. Ours is about a $55 million
Okay.
plan.
This is the modest Dennis Tyler
Yeah,
plan.
yeah,
By
and-
contrast with the multi-million-dollar Tom
Yeah.
Kinghorn plan.
And I think that what we're looking at, and I'm not going to get into
Sure. No, I don't want you to.
dispute with,
Right.
with Ball State.
No, I know.
If they say, no, wait, we want this
Right.
$500 million, then
Yeah.
we're going to have to go find the $500 million.
Okay.
But I think if we can get what we need from the city, then I think that we can probably find the funding to get this thing moving. And then if we do, then I think that would be a tremendous shot in the arm.
To transform this area.
Yeah.
Switching a little bit on you, so reflect on this a bit. This is what I call a kind of numbers question. What do you think, and I've just thrown off a number here that I picked out of the air, I guess being a kind of Trinitarian, I'll pick the number 3.
Yeah.
What do you think are the 3 most important things that Muncie really has to address to assist economic development? I mean, you could give me 10 if you want to, but I just thought, well, if you could give me 3, that'd be fine.
Well, that's good. That's good. That's
Yeah, I got some
good.
interesting
Yeah.
answers to it, I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Let me turn this darn thing off. So we don't
Oh, it's okay.
fool with it. Excuse me.
No, that's all right.
I think, one is we've got to continue to show, so importantly, that Muncie is a first-class city.
Okay.
That we've got a great university here, we've got a great community college here, and we've got a great workforce that's ready and willing to go to work. I think we've got a lot of the amenities. We got Prairie Creek, we got the Cardinal Greenways, we got the Rails to Trails, we got the Minnetrista Center.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of the amenities that businesses are looking at. When they start looking, do we really want to locate in Muncie? And they start, and 6 or 8 months, maybe a year ahead of time, they start reading the newspapers and looking.
Sure.
Now, one of the negatives that I think we've got going for us right now is a lot of what they're reading in the newspaper.
Okay.
I do not believe that businesses, if you talk to the business community are interested in a city that's looking at privatizing and creating volunteer public safety officials and that. So I think that there's going to be a fine line there on how we deal with that, Warren, or we're going to really get ourselves in a jam on that. But you know, our infrastructure, I think we've got to continue to address it because it's in a pretty serious decline. A lot of it is Muncie's fault. A lot of it isn't Muncie's fault too. I think we've got to continue to train our workforce. I think something that's absolutely critical is the city of Muncie has got to continue to network and break down the barriers for whose ever fault it is between Muncie and Ball State and Ivy Tech. I mean, there's always been a barrier there.
That's a different question.
Yeah, and
I'll get to that one later.
But those are ideas. I think that businesses have to know that, hey, we've got an edit plan here. We've got TIF districts here. Of course, see, I always thought that edit money should be put in the bank and it should be there and it should be for strictly economic development purposes.
Oh, okay.
And keep a pool of money here. So if you've got a business that wants to come in and maybe they need some sidewalks and streets in an area, you've got a pocket of money to do it. We haven't had that ability to do that, and we haven't been able to do that. And it's pretty evident that there's things going around. If you look at the donut counties around Marion County, there's growth going around there. Yeah. But it's because that they're in pretty good shape financially. Yeah. They can wave that green wand of money out there to say, hey, come on in here. We can do this for you. We can do that for you. I mean, if you look at what Greensburg did along with the state of Indiana, about $175 million to that Honda plant. Yeah. Right. You know, we've got nothing that we can offer in any shape like that because we don't have any revenue. The other is, and this has been a lot of discussion going on with this property tax group. You know, we've got to continue to have a good public school system. Yeah, right. We can't expect people to want to bring their children and educate them in the city of Muncie if we've got a public school system that's absolutely corroding. I mean, if you look at these, like again, if you go back to those donut counties, those counties around Marion County, or you go to the counties down in southern Indiana that are close to those riverboat casinos and that have a lot of funding coming in, or if you even go up north now to where the casinos are going in at, those public schools and those school systems up there are putting in new buildings. They're creating all sorts of parks and infrastructure around those schools and everything to really show a quality of life. And I think that you've got to do all that to show these businesses and that everybody is really working together. Yeah. And when I was president of the Labor Council a number of years ago, I went to the chamber and I said, you know, we got to start a labor management committee to see what our problems are and what we can do to promote this community. Because everybody, and you well know, for years has always said, well, the whole problem with Muncie is the UAW and all they want to do is fight. Well, when's the last time they've had a strike or a fight?
Long time.
You know, that's just not true. But that's part of the...
Okay.
So...
Yeah. Do you think that right now, from an economic development perspective, Muncie is a easy sell or a hard sell to somebody who might be thinking of coming here?
I think it might be, right now, I think it would be kind of the middle of the road. And simply because I think you got to be honest, and they would have to look, if they've read the paper, and read the editorials and everything else, and they do, we all know they do, that they would probably be concerned with our leadership and where we're heading. Okay. And I think that's a fair statement, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but you know, they've got to be concerned about the direction that we're going. Now, the other side of that is they've also got to look and say, hey, you know, we still got a great university there. There's still a lot of opportunity there. All of our former UAW people in that are getting the training they need and that through our state-funded programs to move over into other areas if they need be.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a workforce here.
Right.
It's whether or not people want to come in and attract this workforce.
Yeah.
And I think that's the job of Muncie and Ball State and everybody working together on how to sell that.
When corporations or businesses close here in Muncie, and you've been around when a lot of this has happened, what kind of reasons do they cite for their decision to say we're taking off, we're not going to do this in Muncie anymore?
Some of the reasons are legitimate, and some of them are just they're about as illegitimate as it could be. I mean, some of them will tell you that they just can't compete with the foreign investors that are creating the jobs and doing that much cheaper. It's amazing that they'll say that they can't compete. People, I've heard it for 10 years that the auto manufacturing community is dead, not just in Muncie, but here, but yet in the last 10 years, we've brought in Subaru, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Suzuki. Yeah. So we're building manufacturing, auto manufacturing in the state of Indiana. We're moving our American manufacturing out, bringing in foreign manufacturing. And I tend to think that it's to devalue the living wage, as they are, and those ones that are coming in are not organized, and the ones that we've lost are.
Yeah, there are more automobile industry related jobs in Muncie now than there were 25 years ago, which I didn't know until I started working on the UAW project.
Yeah.
As you look back over the last 10 to 20 years, so you be the historian for a minute.
Okay.
What roads, or I guess I'm saying decisions here, could Muncie have taken but didn't take? What paths could we have gone down a decade or two or so ago, and we just didn't do that?
I think that if there was anything that maybe there should have been much more cooperation possibly between all of the players in our community and I would say Ball State, Muncie, the Muncie newspaper, organized labor and everybody in working together when they saw that some things were starting to happen. It always bothered me, Warren, when I would hear local politicians, and I never played that blame game, but at times they would go to the south side of Muncie and they'd blame Ball State University for the problems of the city, and
well, I know.
Yeah, and I never thought that Muncie could work very well having islands in it. Here's the south side of Muncie, here's the northeast side of Muncie, the Whiteley area, and here's Ball State, and we continue to keep these islands. I just never ever thought that would be a very good way for the community to grow. And I think in doing all that, if everybody was working together, it could have been a much more positive spin on the newspaper to how they would portray things and print things, and that going back again, like I said, when these businesses look 6-8 months to a year ahead of time, they got to be reading and seeing good things going on.
Well, you've mentioned this 2 or 3 times, so I'm going to really push you out a little bit. What do you think the role of a newspaper is in a community?
Well, I think it's to print the truth and to print the news, and I think they've done that to some extent. But I also think they are in the business to make money, and there has been times that controversy and a lot of that we've created our own controversy in a lot of ways in our community. But in a lot of ways, though, I could tell you we're not a lot different than a lot of these other communities. As I've got to know other legislators throughout the state, they got a lot of the same stuff going on in theirs. So that's, but to me, the role of the newspaper is they print the news. They do it in an honest way, in a forthright way. And here was one of the interesting things. The first meeting that we had, the Labor Management Committee, that I brought organized labor in, and we had people from the chamber in the business community, and we probably have, and we met downstairs in the meeting room at the Roberts Hotel. There's probably 35 of us. The thing out of that first meeting, when we left there, the biggest shock to me was the biggest detriment to this community, that the business chain was the newspaper, in the way that they was portraying.
Well, I think a lot of people think that now.
Our community, yeah.
I'm not so sure I agree with that,
yeah.
but I think that people do think that.
Yeah, I think they do too, and I don't know how you get beyond that. And like I said, you got to remember though, that business isn't any different than any others today.
Right.
It's a dog-eat-dog world. Their circulation is probably dwindling, which means that their advertising selling point is probably dwindling.
Yeah.
So they've got to sell newspapers and whatever they got to do to sell them. But it's.
No, you're right. It's certainly an industry in crisis because they don't know if they're even going to be around 20, 25, 30 years from now.
Sure.
They think, my daughter in LA, my son in Madison, Wisconsin, don't subscribe to the daily paper.
Sure.
They want to find out what's going on. They turn on a computer and look at some paper on the internet. So,
sure. And you can do that. And,
sure.
and I've always said that, things that they write on the editorial page and they allow Larry Riley to write on there. And that's fine. But, I've had Larry write articles about me, and Larry has never, ever, until maybe the last 18 months, ever had one conversation with me. So all the years that he was writing articles about me, Larry was writing those articles with never, ever talking to me and getting a perspective of how Dennis Tyler thinks.
Right.
And that bothered me, and I told the newspaper, I've always been available. When I was a labor leader, when I was a political leader, and now as a legislator. Anybody wants to call me and talk to me, they can do that, and I'm going to be honest with them. Now, they may not like what I say, but I'm still going to be honest with them. That don't always work very well for a politician, but so what? And I even had Larry write an article about me once that he saw me upside a Democrat headquarters talking to a guy in a black suit, and the black guy was reaching into his briefcase, dropped his briefcase, and money fell out of it, and everything. Well, it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever read in my life. And I asked them, and they said, well, that's his opinion, Dennis. And I said, well, that may be his opinion, but I said, he's filling other people's heads with silly stuff, and do we need that? I mean, it's like him wanting to promote this privatization and this volunteerism for the fire department and having Ball State provide the scholarships for him.
I knew you were going to touch on that. I knew it.
Where is Ball State going to get the funding for them scholarships? They're going to get it from the state. Yeah. So they want the state to fund a fire department for the city of Muncie. And that's not going to happen.
Well, these would be students who would be on scholarship, and they'd spend so many days as students here and so many days down at the firehouse. Well, I grew up in New York City, and in my late father's congregation, he was a minister. We had a lot of New York City firefighters, and I always think of what they would think of an idea like that.
Yeah, and how do you do it, and how do you have a response time? And like I said, somebody's got to pay for them scholarships, and Ball State's not going to absorb them scholarships. They couldn't afford to. So somebody's going to have to pay for them. So.
What role do you think that Muncie should play within the larger context of East Central Indiana economic development? We're the kind of the big gorilla here because of the population and the hospital and the university, et cetera.
Well, I think that there's a huge role for them to play, and I think that the Roy Budd and his organization and them, I think that with the economic circumstances that they're dealing with right now, they're probably doing about as well as they can. Excuse me. Part of the problem you got, everybody says they're in this together, the different counties and they are, but still, there is still a competitive market out there from county to county, just like there is from university to university or college to college, is that they all want a piece of that, or a niche of that market. The universities want the students, the counties want the jobs. And so they can say we're all going to work together, and they will, until it comes down to them last few days or them last few dollars, And what if it's Muncie and Anderson, that's both in line for a certain facility to come in there? If you don't think that they're not going to be fighting amongst each other to try and get it done, they are. You know, I mean, that's just human nature. And right now, my biggest concern is I don't see anything coming to Muncie. I see a few things going to Delaware County, just a tidbit here and a tidbit there and others, but I want something to come into the city of Muncie for tax investment.
Well, you touched on this, and since we're sitting here on state property, I'll been saving these questions for last, which are the education ones. And that, to begin with, what role do you think Ball State should play in economic development in this community and the larger region?
Oh, I think Ball State can play a huge role in it. I mean, the one thing that I've learned in the last 2 years sitting on the Ways and Means Committee is the transition that you've seen from your universities and colleges as they come in and make their presentations in front of Ways and Means. They are promoting that they can be the economic development engine in their area, and that's a lot of their role. And I think they can be in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, you see your life science initiatives that IU is doing, and some of the initiatives that Ball State's doing. Indiana State is creating some initiatives. Vincennes University down there now is creating some technology initiatives with Cummins Engine. I think that all of those are programs that helps enhance those areas to create economic development. I think that Ball State has got tremendous assets that we haven't tapped into that we should be. I also think that there's a lot of assets that Ball State is offering and bringing to the table that I don't think that the citizens of Muncie are fully aware of. And if they were, I'm not so sure that Ball State would be the gorilla in this thing that everybody thinks they are. You know, I mean, if you look at the jobs that Ball State creates.
We're now the largest employer.
And if you look at the construction jobs that they have with their construction and reconstruction, and I know that there's a lot of people that complain about that, but you know, the reconstruction, as you well know, most of that doesn't come out of tax dollars. It comes out, you know, it comes out of the funds and that they raise, and
the infamous debt service and bonding.
The debt service and bonding. But what jobs are we creating in Muncie, Indiana that are sustainable if it's not for these construction jobs and building trades jobs that Ball State's doing right now? I mean, it's pretty bleak. So, I mean, but Ball State has so many assets, and I think that Joanne Gora and her staff has been more than agreeable to reaching out to the community and offering. I know they do a lot of work with Motivator Minds over in Whiteley. They've done a lot on the South Side redevelopment. I've sat in on meetings when Dan Cannon was mayor with Joanne Gore, Tom Kinghorn, Tom Morrison, and others. I think that they're ready, willing, and able to bring forward anything. I think that they would like to see something the same way coming back to them from the city of Muncie with some ideas and some direction on ways that we can improve this area out here through the infrastructure and that. And I think that once you see all that start coming together, and I do believe that Ball State has got the wherewithal and the staff and that can be very beneficial in bringing people together to get some of these things done.
How about the community college? How do you think they ought to be involved in economic development?
Well, I think that there's a big role for them to play too. You know, Ivy Tech is very involved in the training programs for the building trades and that. As a matter of fact, a unemployment bill that I just had passed this last session, we continued to create and raise the funding for Ivy Tech to do the apprenticeship building trades programs and training and reinstruction. So there's a huge role for them to play in that, and I think also that there's a huge role for them to play with your inner cities and that, especially a city like Muncie, on getting these kids transitioned from high school, maybe to Ivy Tech, and then to Ball State. And my concern is that we've got to have a way to get them kids from here to there, and that's the transportation
Sure, right.
and some other things to get
Yeah.
that done. But I think that it's amazing, and I don't think people thought about it 15, maybe 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, other than the people that was involved in your higher ed, that there's going to be a correlation someday between your community colleges, your universities, and what they're going to bring.
Well, there has been in virtually every other state for
Yeah.
a long time before Indiana got involved
Yeah.
in this.
Yeah,
You know, this is sort of like the Stan Jones plan
yeah,
that he began to articulate back in the late 1990s about
Yeah.
developing Ivy Tech into a statewide community college
Yeah.
system.
You know, one of the things that's really been discouraging to me, and I don't know where the blame should fall, but if you go around to your other cities in the state of Indiana and look at those universities and especially one that's got a major hospital that's got another 1,000 employees
Right.
a block away from it, we have no true shopping area within walking distance. And if you go to IU, you go to Purdue, I mean, you go to all these others, Notre Dame, within just a walking area, they got a fantastic village or whatever you want to call it that is really booming and is growing economically.
Right.
And in doing that is bringing in millions of tax dollars
Yeah.
into those communities that they can continue to do
Well,
that.
we used to have that.
Yeah, we used
When
to
I
have that.
came here in the late 60s, we had that.
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully, with some of the vision that,
Yeah.
that people are looking at, we'll be able to get something moving in that area and get it going.
Well, those are all the formal questions I have. But at the end of all of my interviews, I always give my interviewees an opportunity to add anything on any aspect of this topic or anything else that you'd like to add. So here's your
Sure.
opportunity.
Here's what I think is one of the most critical parts of this economic development mess that we're in, Warren, and I was finally able to get it and figure it out last year. But you know, we started some property tax reform in 2006 in House Bill 1478 and circuit breakers and creating circuit breakers on property of 2% and that. And there was a lot of discussion on what the impacts on cities and towns and all that was going to be. And I couldn't quite get it through my thick head just what was going on. Well, before the session started in 2007, we had the chamber bring in two different consulting firms. One of them was Umbarger and Associates, and I believe the other one was Bingham and McHale. But they put on a presentation up to the chamber for anybody wanted to attend, elected officials and that. And at that time, at the 2% on that circuit breaker, Muncie's revenue loss was going to be much less than what it was under House Bill 1001. They talked about job loss and what might happen, and that got me to thinking. When I got home, I thought, Dennis, there's something in this that you're missing. Well, I went back into the middle 80s, like we was talking about earlier, back when Muncie was really humming with jobs. I pulled up, I keep everything. And when I was president of the union with the firefighters, everything, and I negotiated all my contracts. I went back and I pulled up the numbers that I had of the UAW people and labor people in the job market at that time that we had in the city of Muncie. I asked Legislative Services to run me the numbers from then, bring them up to today's wages, and run me the numbers so I could see what the revenue loss would be for my community. Just with those numbers, Warren, we went from a $5 million net loss to almost a $10 million surplus.
Wow.
And it hit me.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on. We're losing all these jobs.
Yeah.
They're gone. The jobs we're bringing in are not enough to sustain the revenue loss that we're feeling from those others. And how are we going to change that? And I guess that's what I was talking about earlier is we've got to come up with a way to make sure that the jobs that we're creating are really going to create a living wage. You know, the Myers and the Menards and the Walmarts and that, they're okay.
Right.
But, you know, they were never intended to be
No.
family-oriented, family-driven living wage jobs.
No.
And that's what they are.
Yeah, that's what they've become.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
until we deal with that, things aren't going to get much better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
That's right.
that's a tough pill to swallow, but it's true. You know, we can't. I just got notification a couple of weeks ago. Navistar was cutting 500 jobs. You know, and they won't be coming back. Well,
Yeah.
how many jobs do we have to create to replace $522 an hour Navistar job? That would probably be 1,500 to 2,500 of them $6 and $7 an hour jobs.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned those jobs because you almost automatically then begin to think, by contrast with what families were like 30, 40, 50 years ago. If you're going to be at a Menards or you're going to be at a Walmart or at a Myers, then it better be both people in the family.
Yeah.
And maybe your son too.
Mm-hmm.
But you're certainly going to have to look at this as a two-wage scenario,
Absolutely.
two-income scenario.
Absolutely.
And that wasn't the way it was.
See, when I went to school, like I said, my dad worked at Warner Gear.
Yeah.
His income, until Mom went to work for him, was enough to sustain me, my brother, my younger brother, and my older sister.
Yeah.
How many jobs are we creating in this area right now today that you could do a family of 6 and do that?
And not a lot.
Hell no, you couldn't.
Yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it like that. Pardon me for saying hell no, but I mean, the truth's the truth. My wife and I was out at Lowe's the other day buying something. Got done. Of course, I had one of my Dennis Tyler State Representative T-shirts on, and the lady there that waited on us at the cashier, she said, "Dennis Tyler, you know Dennis Tyler?" And I said, "Yeah, I am Dennis Tyler."
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I work with your son." How you work with my son? That was her second job. She works at Accompanying for her first job out there, the Honda subsidiary. And Lee's Aaron comes out there and but see, now my son's been out there for a good while.
Yeah.
Accompanying, he's worked out there for well over 5 years. He's just barely making $11 an hour.
Huh.
Now, with him and his wife and 2 children.
And that's an automobile-related place.
Yeah. Now, they treat him pretty good.
Yeah.
They have a 401k and they have a health care plan, but his 401k, he's lost $2,000 in it in the last year. So it's not self-sustaining.
Right, yeah.
Then the health care now, they're starting to make them pay more for it.
Yeah.
So that's not and then they took away their last raise and they didn't give it to him. And of course, my son got all upset because he said they told them they wasn't going to be able to give him a raise, and a week later they was bringing in plasma TVs and installing them up in the front offices.
Well, I want to thank you for agreeing to participate in the project.
Well, I appreciate it.
Very, very kind of you to do that.
Thank you.